Want to get away? Sure you do. It's summer 2022, and it is the weekend of July the 17th. And we are delighted that you have joined us from wherever you have gotten away to with NCCP Anywhere for this continued series as we study some Old Testament travel narratives right alongside our NCCP campers. We are already in week number 3. I'm Pastor John Rudolph of the North Carroll Cooperative Parish, and again, blessings to you wherever you may be. One of the first times that I really got away, really got away. In fact, my first time ever in an airplane was with Pastor Melissa, and she said, if you're going to be married to me, you've got to get on a plane and you've got to be willing to go. And so we went to Jamaica, and we went to a resort, an all-inclusive resort. And let me just say, this was a shock to me because I had never been anywhere in the world, of all that extravagance, which it seemed to me because I wasn't used to it, where you could get food and drink 24/7. B, it was beautiful. We were in the midst of, mountainous hills and on a beach and beautiful weather and warm, clear Caribbean water. But C, and more importantly, everybody was so nice and so loving. And I know what you're going to say. Well, they're getting paid to do so because they want you to pick their resort. And I'm sure there's some truth to that. But everybody we encountered in Jamaica just seemed to be so happy and loving and there to serve others. In the airport, in our transportation, in the little villages, everywhere, on and off the resort. And so it was an incredible first worldly trip for me as an adult. And it was just something that I have never experienced since, really. And we've been to other places and places in the world, but that Jamaican hospitality, where everybody seemed to love me and they didn't even know me, was an incredible experience. And it wanted me to want to get away more often. Unfortunately, as of late, I haven't been any place like that, but that's okay. We can dream. Our series continues in the Bible stories with traveling narratives once again. And this time we spend some time a little bit fast forward compared to last week as we left Joseph in Egypt. And we'll figure out about how the Israelites got out of Egypt when you join us next week. But now we skip over Moses for a moment. And we're in the time of the judges prior to, pre-monarchy. And we're in and around the promised land still. In the first verses of this short 4-chapter book, we're in Bethlehem. But then a common theme, a drought hits. And so Naomi and her husband, Elimelech, move to Moab. Moab was another country southeast of Bethlehem, and they were going there to survive and to live out while there was a famine in Bethlehem. While they're there in Moab, they have these 2 sons, and the 2 sons grow and marry Moabite women. And these women are Orpah and Ruth. While we're there in Moab and these marriages have taken place, Elimelech has passed and the 2 sons pass. And so now we're left with these 3 widows in this Moabite countryside, which brings us to today's reading, beginning with verse 6 in chapter 1. Then she started to return with her daughters-in-law from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had considered his people and given them food. So she set out from this place where she had been living, she and her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to go back to the land of Judah. So we'll pause right there for just a second. So again, the men have died. She decides that things have improved. She's heard in Bethlehem, so she's going to pack up, which they do, and they're already on their way, these three women. And it's going to be a journey. It's going to be some wilderness, some mountainous. They're going to have to either go around some water or through it. So all these familiar themes of travel and journey taking in the Old Testament. They're going to have to worry about wild animals, shelter, food, water, robbers. And so it's just not a fun trip. But they have set out to go back to Bethlehem. It's while they're on their way, not prior to, not during the packing, not during the planning, but they're already journeying, that Naomi pauses for a moment. And this happens. But Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, "Go back, turn back, each of you to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant you that you may find security, each of you in the house of your own husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. They said to her, "No, we will return with you and your people." But Naomi said, in other words, she insisted, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they were grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters. It has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." Then they wept aloud again. And so Naomi's having this moment. She's feeling bad about herself, but she is putting Ruth and Orpah above and beyond her own needs. And she says, stay here. Go back to your family's homes where you can be cared for, and you might have an opportunity for further marriage. And so it's after the second insisting, this second pushback, that Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And then she says, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." So a third time she speaks to Ruth. But Ruth says one of the most beautiful poems in all the Bible. It's poetic, her words, her response. "Do not press me to leave you or turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. Where you are buried, I will be buried. May the Lord do thus, and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. So the two of them went on up until they came to Bethlehem. And then the whole town was stirred up with their return. And so this beautiful moment of this image of Ruth clinging to her mother-in-law. No one would have blamed her. In fact, Orpah makes a good and wise decision. She stays with her family. Nobody would have blamed Ruth if she had done the same. In fact, Naomi had insisted over and over and over again for Ruth, just stay, turn back. But Ruth would not do it. As the story goes, as they return to Bethlehem, Ruth starts to go into survival mode and going out and trying to get them settled with some food and trying to get their bearings back and figure out how it is they're going to navigate this life now that this journey has brought them back to Bethlehem and brought her to Bethlehem for the first time. She's out in the fields and she's gleaning the fields that happen to be owned by one of Naomi's family members, Boaz. And so it's through this interaction in the fields and this recovering of the grain that she eventually meets some of the workers, and there's an introduction made, and she finds out that there's some attraction possibly here between her and Boaz, and that there might be, especially when she goes back and tells Naomi, her mother-in-law, what has occurred in the fields. Naomi's wheels start to turn, and she sees the possibilities of a journey, a life together. And she concocts this great plan of getting Ruth all dressed up and smelling good and all the things that they would do back in those times. And she says, you go tonight, and be careful, but you go to the threshing room floor, and Boaz will be there asleep when he's asleep and everybody else is asleep. You sneak in, you get at his feet, and you lie there, and let's see what happens next in terms of this connection. And so it's a great and wonderful, romantic, beautiful, possibly even PG-13 or rated R, depends on how you read this. One way or another, they get connected. And then there's some conversation here about redeemers and that the possibility that Boaz might be able to be Ruth's redeemer. And there's, Jewish law and custom about, how it is a widow would be married within the family after the husband passes. And so they're navigating some of that. And Boaz discovers that there might be somebody else, and there is, in fact, somebody else that has first claim. And I know that's strange for us to think about it in that way, living when we live, but that's the way things were done then. And he says, I have to go check with him first. And then when that man declines, it sets them free to be able to be married. And in fact, they are. And so Ruth and Naomi and Boaz start to live together as a family, and they care for one another, and they eventually have a child, and they have children, which sets us up for the last paragraph, the last passage in Ruth. And again, just beautiful, beautiful words here. As it says, Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When they came together, the Lord made her conceive, and she bore a son. And then it talks about all the women of the neighborhood getting so excited for Naomi, and Naomi as well. And she picks up and takes the child, and there's celebration, and there's promises made. And a son has been born to Naomi. The women shout. They named him Obed. So Obed. So Boaz and Ruth had Obed. And what's remarkable about this story, this journey that has taken Naomi from Bethlehem to Moab and back to Bethlehem, this traveling that has taken Ruth from Moab to Bethlehem as an outsider, and now all of a sudden she's married in again to this family of Israelites, into the home of Boaz. She has this son Obed, and then watch what God does with this. Now these are the descendants of Perez, and it names out all those descendants. But what the point is that Obed becomes the father of Jesse, and Jesse becomes the father of David. Yes, that David, King David. And so this story has a remarkable ending that keeps us in line, keeps the story going, keeps the journey alive, that's going to point us towards King David. And then, yes, even further into the New Testament, Joseph, who's engaged to the Virgin Mary who births Jesus, Joseph is part of David's line. And so this whole story, this whole journey, this whole narrative comes together here at the pinnacle of this is the story of Ruth. If Ruth stays in Moab, which she should have, and she was invited to, and she had every right to, but she doesn't. If she stays there, the story's over. There is no King David. But she goes. She makes an incredibly selfless, loving gesture by going with her mother-in-law, and the rest, as they say, is history. Ruth is not the only remarkable person in this story, although she is. Naomi is remarkable. Boaz is remarkable. The next in line, Ken, that said, no, go ahead, Boaz, you can marry. Ruth is remarkable. Nobody in this story, absolute zero in this dramatic, epic journey from Bethlehem to Moab, back to Bethlehem, and looking into the future of King David, nobody in this story does anything to harm somebody else. None. And the Bible is filled with ordinary, normal, flawed human beings, even the best, King David. And people like him make mistakes. Even Moses gets in trouble with God. Everybody does harm to others, it seems like, in these epic journey stories. Joseph's own brothers put him in a pit. But nobody in this story does harm to another. This story is all about love of God and love of neighbor. It's countercultural. It's incredible. And everybody's decision here, and at the core and at the heart of their decision, I can go this way or I can go that way. Everybody puts others first. It's amazing. And through that, God works through that. God works through this story and continues this journey out and on to the other side, pointing us towards King David and beyond. If anybody in this story gets ornery and puts themselves first, if Ruth stays, the story's over. If Boaz gets mad that there's this poor peasant foreign girl in my fields taking my food, put her in the jail, put her in the cellar, the story's over. If the person that was next in line says, "Yeah, I'll take Ruth as I'll be her redeemer," the story's over. Everybody has an opportunity to end this story if they put themselves first, if they're selfish, but everybody acts in incredibly loving and selfless ways. And so what this tells me is that Boaz isn't the main character of this story. Naomi is not the star. Ruth, the book's namesake, is not the main character of this epic journey. It's God. God is at work in every single turn of this journey, from Moab to Bethlehem, from Bethlehem to Moab, from Moab back to Bethlehem and beyond. It's incredible. And so as we think about where we are in life's journey, if we think about the travels that we've been on and the decisions that we have made, every decision that we've ever made has brought us to this point. The decisions that we made to go someplace, the decisions that we made to stay right where we are, the decisions we made to turn back have all impacted where we are today, and it's an incredible thing to think about. And we pray as we move forward that when we make decisions, we make loving, selfless decisions like the characters in this story, in order that God's will be done. And then we also are thankful as Christians, as followers of Jesus who came to us, because we know we don't always make those selfless decisions, that even when we make a poor choice, even when we don't love God with all our heart, mind, and soul, even when we don't love our neighbor as ourselves, God can still work through and in spite of our poor choices. And we give thanks for that as well on our journeys. So as I think back to getting away to Jamaica and all those loving souls that were there to greet us and serve us and speak to us and spend time with us, that's the spirit that I want each and every day on my journeys, whether close to home, out of town, or somewhere around the world. I want to be like them. And I know that it's only possible if my heart is right with God through the grace of God, and that I'm practicing and putting into practice my love of God and love of neighbor. And when I do that, I can make selfless, loving choices towards other people as well. And so I hope, again, wherever you are, wherever you're joining us and wherever you're tuning in to NCCP anywhere, that you can take a moment as well and think about where your journey is taking you and God's will for your own life, and that you too want to have a heart after Ruth's own. You too want to make loving decisions like Boaz and Naomi. And you too can acknowledge, as I do, that when we come up short, God's grace can pick us up and still work through us and put us back on the pathway. And so I ask that God be with us, you and I, until we meet again next week, as we go back in time and catch up with Moses in Egypt and see how it is he's going to overcome some of the obstacles that are in his way on his journey into the promised land. Amen, and God bless.